So it's been about 2 weeks, and the reason for silence is because I got my cerclage done, and it wasn't like terrible. I wasn't recovering for 2 weeks, but the cerclage happened on a Tuesday, and then I got really bad nausea and sickness and like round ligament pain, so all over discomfort, and I just like wasn't feeling so hot. Last Thursday was actually the day that I felt the worst. I came home from work a little early. I went into bed. I hid from my kid, which, you know, means times are really tough. And I have this thing where I'm super hungry and nothing's appealing, and I don't really know what to do. But thankfully, like after that swell of grossness and feeling really yucky, I'm pretty good. Like I'm eating normally, I'm eating meat again. Not everything turns me off. So hopefully I'm on the up and up. So I'm in a good place to talk to everyone and give an update and really dig into a cerclage, right? So what is a cerclage? Why this happened? So I actually had a cerclage with my first, Harrison, and a cerclage is a cervical stitch. It is an outpatient procedure. You go into the hospital, you get an epidural or a spinal. There might be a little bit of difference between the density of what you're receiving. You get a spinal, and they basically sew your cervix shut. And this is to stop preterm labor, which is super scary. And a lot of the reasons that they put for having a cerclage, they call an incompetent cervix, which is just rude. But an incompetent cervix is usually diagnosed because it's either opening or you've gone into preterm labor and perhaps lost a baby in the past. Because your cervix should be pretty solid up until the last weeks of your pregnancy. So, and then, you know, of course, when you go into labor and the weeks prior, your cervix dilates slowly, slowly, slowly. Some women's cervix never dilates. They go into labor and they go to like 2 centimeters. My cervix, last time around, I got the cerclage at 23 weeks. It was more of an emergency. Everything was looking fine. And then suddenly from my 20-week scan to my 23-week scan, my cervix looked a lot shorter. So they called it like dynamic shortening of your cervix. So I went in, they did a check, and they could open my cervix like with a finger. He could kind of put it in there, which is not good. And it was short, and it was definitely a preventative measure. It wasn't necessary, but it was recommended. And so not knowing what it really was or what the recovery was like, I went for it, right? I had like a 24 hours to make a decision. Went to the doctor. They said, you should probably get this done. It's up to you. Otherwise, you're going to have to be on, severe bed rest, which is not recommended for anyone because your muscles pretty much, can deteriorate. And also mentally, it just messes with you, I think. So I made the decision to do it, and recovery at 23 weeks was very different than recovery at 12 weeks, which I had done 2 weeks ago when I was 12 weeks. I'm now 14 weeks. So recovery at 23 weeks, you have a lot more pressure, and you sometimes can have contractions because, your baby is viable after 20 weeks, they say. So I had the cerclage, and I was put in the labor and delivery unit. So I was surrounded by people who were having C-sections and nurses who were very accustomed to dealing with pregnant patients. So that process was very smooth and very nice. I came in, they hooked me up to IVs, they put an ultrasound monitor on me, they were monitoring my blood pressure to see if I was having contractions or what else was going on. And after I did have the procedure done, I was having contractions the first time. And so they fed me. It was just a lot more catered to the circumstance I was in, which was pregnant. This time around, I was in the outpatient unit of a hospital, still very equipped to deal with this. But the fact that I was pregnant, I think, was lost on them. Like, I had to fast first. I had to fast starting at like 10 p.m. the day before. My appointment this time around was at 8:15 in the morning. I had to get there at 5:45 a.m., which is terrible at any point in your life to wake up that early, which is like really waking up at 5 to get to the hospital. And you have to fast and not really drink. And the fear of that is that if you have to be put under general anesthesia, that you'll have fasted. You don't really need to fast for an epidural. So I had to fast, and for me, waking up early and not eating are two things that are terrible and make me feel really sick, especially at that point in my pregnancy. So I was pretty scared about that. So I did that. I went in. They pushed me into the surgery room eventually. It was a little late. The IV, putting in the IV took the longest out of all the things they had to do to me, right? They had to find a vein. They couldn't find the vein. The epidural hurts for like a second, but like you need it. So I was very willing to participate. And the cerclage, like the actual cerclage, maybe was 2 minutes. The doctors picked a nice soundtrack. So I was listening to John Mellencamp, Little Houses. So that was fun. They started with Billy Joel, which I approved of, but I really was not chatty during this procedure. I was pretty tearful. Even though I knew what was happening, there was a chance, because I guess the doctors never know until they really see where you're at and see what your cervix looks like when everything is, pulled back, the curtains and all that stuff. So I could have gotten one of two stitches going in. The McDonald stitch is by far the most common stitch, and it's the simplest stitch to do. It's the purse string stitch. So they're literally taking this almost like mesh plastic, and they're sewing around your cervix in this like loopity-loop pattern and tying it off. And it's like, they call it a purse string stitch, and that's called the McDonald stitch. It's the most common, it's the simplest. The second one is called the Cerclage, car with a K, and that's more involved, and that's what I've read. I haven't received that one. It's a more permanent stitch, and sometimes when you get that stitch, you need to have a C-section. They also say that stitch is better at preventing infection. I mean, it really depends who you are and what you're doing when it comes to infection. So not knowing exactly what it would be like and what the recovery would be like, I was scared. And just surgery is super scary, and hospitals are super scary. And the feeling of, I've had an epidural with my first when I was in labor. This spinal injection was a lot denser and took forever to wear off. So they put it in, and then, they have you sit so it sinks to your bottom, right? Because they need it to be like over your groin area, and then it goes into your legs. And it feels like when you're at the dentist and they put in Novocaine and you feel like your lip is just like out to here. It's like so huge, and you're feeling it with your fingertips, and it feels really puffy, but obviously it's not. And that's what my whole body felt like. And you're trying to move things and you can't, like I couldn't wiggle my toes. And not having that control is just foreign to me and makes me feel uneasy. So that wasn't good. So I was pretty just, I don't know, scared, like deer in the headlights for most of it. And then they wheeled me back to recovery. And this time in recovery, I had to wait until I could get most of the feeling back in my legs, and my husband wasn't allowed to come in with me, which I was not prepared for. The last time he was there for the entire procedure, except for the actual procedure, right? So we were at the hospital for, say, 4 hours, and the procedure of the cerclage was 15 minutes, so I saw him for everything but 15 minutes. And of course, after the procedure, they wheel you back, and I'm just like tearing, and they're asking me questions, and I can't really speak. And it's like, muffled cries, not like sobs, but still, they're all looking at me like I'm crazy, because in the scheme of things, this is very simple, but very big to me. I've only been to the hospital 3 times. 2 times were for cerclages, 2 cerclages, and once was for birth. And hospitals just don't like them. So I waited around in this recovery room for about like an hour and a half, and I was starving, and I was allowed to eat, but they didn't feed me, and they didn't realize like the importance of not feeding a pregnant person. So when I asked for food very vocally, they offered me like a turkey or a ham sandwich, 2 things that you're not supposed to be eating when you're pregnant, depending on what restrictions you have. But there's fear of just like bacteria in deli meats and nitrates. So I was at a loss. I brought some snacks, because I always have snacks. If anyone knows me, I always have like half-eaten snacks in my bag. And I lasted on those. RX bars have helped me throughout pregnancy and breastfeeding. I sometimes, just am hit with this huge pang of hunger, and I don't know what to do with myself. And these RX bars are just like, this is not sponsored in any way, but these RX bars are pure protein, and there's like not crap in it. So I think it's like 12 grams of protein. Depending on the flavor, it has dates and almonds and egg whites, which are all things I like. And then they come in some really delicious flavors. I like mixed berry. They're hard to eat, but other than that, I have no complaints. Eventually I'm wheeled out into like the other recovery room, and my husband Jeff gets to be with me. And then I just have to wait to get more feeling back, which took a lot of time. We got there and my procedure is 8:15, and we didn't leave until about 2:30 or 3 o'clock. So it was a long day. A lot of it just like sitting around watching Suits on my downloaded iPad and waiting to pee. And I couldn't pee the first time, which has never happened to me. You know, you're like there and you're straining and you feel like you have the feeling and you should be able to pee. But I had to wait a little bit longer. I went home. I was able to walk. I was able to pick up my son, who's like 25 pounds. And I felt pretty good. I felt no pressure. My like internal vagina area did not feel any different, which it definitely did the first time. And the bleeding stopped basically, you know, that day. So I was really lucky. It went really well. I think just more women should know that this is an option, or that it could happen. A lot of women who have had a LEEP procedure done, which is a biopsy of the cervix. Sometimes it's, you know, just the removal like cutting, or sometimes it's laser. Have to get this done because a piece of your cervix is missing and there's not much to work with to begin with. So if you had that procedure done in your past, just be on the lookout. Talk to your doctor. You might want to have your cervix monitored more than just once a month, and sometimes they don't even do an internal ultrasound, which can give you a clearer picture of where your cervix is at. So that is all the cerclage stuff. Not related to the cerclage, I started having around ligament pain around 13 weeks, just like really bad front and back. And because I had this procedure, and because I'm a geriatric pregnancy, and because I know too much at this point, just from seeing friends and hearing stories and everything that's happening out in social media and the internet about miscarriage and how prevalent it is, like 20% of pregnancies end in miscarriage, which is a pretty alarming stat. I've been more on the alert this time. So like just pain in general, even though it's truly growing pains, it made me a little cautious and a little scared. But having the cerclage in place makes me feel pretty good. But there can be other reasons, of course, for miscarriage. So that went away, thankfully, but I'm definitely between like 13 weeks and 14 weeks, I've started to grow a bunch. So my body is just kind of like expanding and giving in to all the hormone changes and everything that is happening with producing this little girl in my belly, which when I see her, I just get so excited. And now I'm 14 weeks and my nausea's gone away and I'm feeling pretty good. And Harrison's still really excited for his baby sister and goes up to people and goes, "Baby sister, mama's belly," which blows me away. Like his ability to speak at, you know, he's 26 months now, is so incredible. I am loving every second. His stories, his like determination to like get across what he's trying to say. I love it. I absolutely love it. And when Harrison was about like 20 months, I was a little scared. He like wasn't speaking that much, and his pronunciation was a little off or garbled, and I was diagnosing him, you know, I do this, diagnosing him with just crazy things that he didn't have, you know, not doing anything about it. I was just like, oh, I'm online, I'm finding symptoms that kind of match, and maybe he has this, we should get it checked out. But he's so fine, and I'm can be crazy. I think it's more just trying to get ahead of things, right? I have this thing of like not wanting to live in denial, not wanting to, if there's a problem, I'm gonna fix it. And so I'd rather fix it earlier if I detect a problem, but sometimes I make problems where there are no problems, but I don't do anything about it. I'm not like to the next degree crazy. And so now I've told work, I'm out, I'm proud, I'm letting people know that I want to borrow their girl clothes because I don't want to buy stuff. and I'm feeling good. Thinking good thoughts. I'm going to try to make more videos now that I'm in a good place, and connect with some other moms who are also pregnant. I feel like there's a certain wave happening, so we can all just like be inside in winter and snuggle our babies together. And I'm also looking into classes for Harrison. So come January, when I deliver, Harrison will be 2.5. So he'll be ready for more interaction, more like structured school stuff. He has the best situation right now, which is a nanny share, which happens in my house. Another boy who's the same age basically comes over, and since they've been 6 months, they've been together. And we have the best nanny. It took us 5 nannies to get to Jackie, who's just the most wonderful. Like, if I could picture someone who talks to my kid how I want them spoken to, who does activities, who empowers them, who takes them on adventures, Jackie is it. I feel so lucky to have found her. I want her to be with us forever, and she won't commit because she has her own life, which I totally get, and she doesn't want to disappoint us. And she's also newly engaged, so things are going to happen. I totally get it, but I'm hoping she's with us into little girl's life for a bit, because she's really wonderful. But we got to send Harrison to some school during the day because he needs to interact with other kids and grow his mindset, and he has a really cool play group, and that'll continue. But I definitely want him around other kids doing more, session-based learning, but of course, like mostly play-based, because he's 2, and I get that. So that is it. Hopefully this was an okay update. It's more of like a PSA about what a cerclage is, what recovery is like. I'm open to any questions or any comments. If someone's going through this and is scared, I will talk to you, because I was scared both times, even though I knew what was happening the second time. And these online message boards are really, really scary, because you have women who have had miscarriages in the past, who have lost babies, who have had cerclages that have broke, which is not really the norm. And my midwife says it has never happened in her practice, or that she's known about. But it does happen. Things happen. So there's a lot of crazy information out there. I can give you my experience. With my kind of cerclage, by the way, the McDonald, it is taken out at 36 weeks. And then, you can go into labor depending on what's happening with your cervix. With Harrison, my first, as soon as it was taken out, my cervix was at 1 centimeter dilated. And then a week later, on that Friday, like exactly a week, it was 3, and I was having really bad back pain, which I later learned was back labor. And then my water broke the following day, and I went to the hospital, and I was 5. So that was like at 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. And I quickly went to 10, I think within the hour. So I am definitely on the lookout for when my cerclage is taken out. Maybe it will be taken out a little bit later, like 36 and a half. And then I'll probably put myself on modified bed rest for a little bit. Just not push myself, since I know what could happen. And I would love this girl to get to 37 and a half. Like, I think Harrison needed like a few more days. He was exactly 37, which is full term, but he did end up in the NICU for 5 days. And I've said this before, I can't go back there. But good things are happening. I'm excited, and thanks for listening. Bye.